So we are really grateful to our special guest who has travelled quite a distance to be with us here this evening. He shares the pages of the Farming Independent with Jim, although I suppose maybe I should say Jim shares them with him. But he is hugely knowledgeable of rural Ireland and of farming, and of course is very well known to you all as the presenter of Ear to the Ground on RTE. Give a warm limerick welcome to Darren.
Evening, everybody. Might just get this up a little bit, will we?
I think so.
Hang on a second, without breaking it. These men are great at breaking stuff. It's lovely to be down this part of the world. I don't get a chance to do too many Ear to the Ground. We need to do more Ear to the Ground stories from West Limerick. I have to fly for a couple of angles later on this evening. We did something on a flagstone house down here years ago. I'm sure that was a story that came from Declan O'Brien. I have the pleasure of knowing several scions of the O'Brien family. I think half of the room here tonight is probably O'Brien's, if I'm guessing correctly. But during my time when I was working full-time in the Indo, there was hardly a year went by that I wasn't giving Pat O'Brien a call to get some lowdown on something, whether he was buying second-hand milk and powders. Is Pat here, is he?
He is.
I think I got him into trouble.
Down in the corner,
there we go, yeah. And what was that I was writing about, that you had bought the milk and powder second-hand, and you were online, and I think it was something anyway that just came out a bit funny, yeah. But Pat was a good source. Of course, Declan O'Brien was my boss for many years in the farm in Indo, and Jim's boss. That made for some interesting conversations on the phone, I can tell you. You know how the O'Briens wear their heart on their sleeve. And of course, Jim was the first person to ever commission me to write a feature in print, because I started out when I did Ag Science. I fell into a gig in RT Radio, and that's where I kind of figured out what media was about, but I had no kind of experience or training in print journalism, and it was down to people like Jim to take a bit of a chance on a young buck from County Meath who thought he knew everything about anything. And of course, media is a world that takes itself very seriously, far too seriously at times. So it was important for a young fella to be taken seriously too. So I'm eternally grateful to Jim for giving me a chance. I think that first piece was about some walkway that was opening up in Leitrim or Roscommon. It's 15, 16, maybe 20 years ago now that it happened. And I can remember Jim's number is one of the kind of 3 phone numbers I can remember, because I was so excited about doing the thing that I had to ring him afterwards and kind of give him the lowdown on what I'd found out, and was I going to make the 1,000 words, and had I got the photos taken. And once I ticked all the boxes, Jim was all warmth and encouragement. And it was kind of ironic that maybe 10 years later it was me who was actually giving Jim the writing instructions in terms of what we were looking for to fill the pages. Just in case you're confused, Declan had bailed out of the Indo because he decided he wanted more letters after his name and left me holding the baby. It wasn't my intention to be the editor of the farm in Indo, but there I was. So it was, and you know, me as the editor should have been all encouragement and warmth for Jim, but I kind of probably, if I think back honestly about it, I'd say the warmth was still being emanated from the other end of the phone, from Jim's end. Some might suggest that it was more hot air than warmth, but it was always entertaining hot air, if that was the case. I had a look through the book. I just got a copy of it during the week, and it's another brilliant read. In fact, I had to stop myself from reading it because it's one of those books that you pick up and say, I'm just going to read one piece here and it'll be 5 minutes and then I'll get on with the rest of the day's work. And you read one, you enjoy it so much, you find, 3 or 4 or 5 chapters later you're going, Mother of God, look at the time, I have to put this down, which I think is a great sign. I think Jim has kind of forged a modern day pulpit with his weekly column in the back pages of the Farm and Indo. It's not a pulpit that ever spews fire and brimstone or even doctrine, but as one of the many who I suppose has drifted from the weekly routine of Mass on a Sunday, I think Jim's weekly take is as close as it gets to a modern sermon on the issues, big and small, that we all face. And what I think is remarkable in Jim's case is that he comes up with something that is so readable and so well written, whether it's informative or entertaining, week after week. Everybody has a story in them, and I kind of think that everybody has a decent article in them or a decent couple of columns. But, at the end of the day, whether it's me or Jim or anyone else, when you boil it all down to brass tacks, our lives are pretty humdrum. We get on with the same stuff as pretty much anyone else. And to turn that into something that's readable on a week after week basis is impressive. And think about it, Jim's been writing for the Farm and Indo for 7 years doing that column. Am I right in saying 7 years?
About 5 years of the column and about 10 years doing property.
10 years, 5 years of columns, 50 odd weeks of the year is 250 columns. That's a lot of visits back to the same well. The well in his head of thoughts and ideas, notions, some might say, and still manages to make it a page that a lot of people refer to. And it's kind of almost incongruous that the supplement is, the original idea behind the supplement, the farm supplement in the Indo, is it's all about prices and technology and the politics that affect farmers' incomes. So to have this kind of little step out of that whole hard nuts and bolts scene is, a lot of people might say, editors be saying, I don't know if that's really a fit. And yet, I think through time, Jim has really carved out a niche there that, as I say, has become a bit of a must-read. I want to give you a few samples. There's a couple of pieces in here that I love. It starts off with a column that I think just begs to be read. The title is When Tractors Were Porsches. And I can remember reading that in the paper thinking, damn, that's a great line. Because as a journalist, you're always looking for a hook in that top line. And that is as good a hook as it gets. And Jim manages to straddle both the journalistic world and the literary world by virtue of his command of the language, and I think it comes out really well in this piece. It's the first piece in the book. He talks about a German mechanic that came to service the O'Brien's Porsche. Yes, they had a Porsche, and no, it wasn't a Carrera, it was an actual tractor. And he described the mechanic as an exotic creature whose annual visit was a welcome injection of variety into a monocultural and almost self-contained rural world. The pieces are always laced with humour. a couple of lines down in the piece, he talks that if bumper stickers had been in fashion at the time, we would have attached one to the saloon that read, "Never mind this, my tractor is a Porsche." It sounds about 1,000,000 miles away from anything you would classify as a sermon, but from Teutonic mechanics and Porsche tractors, Jim brings that same piece to a close with this paragraph. And this was written during COVID. Meanwhile, Christmas is coming, and the Scrooge-like pronouncements emanating from Leinster House are far from encouraging. There's more ho 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 to be found in a 1980s budget speech. We can only hope that visitors will soon be free to come and go as they please. Until then, we can only remember a time when they did, a golden era when even our tractors were Porsches. That's writing. It's great writing, and I want to give you another few little samples from the book. Jim is going to read a few pieces properly, but I just want to give you a few lines. This is a piece about winter, and it's called "Fragility and Ingenuity Come Face to Face." And, you know, winter. What can you write about winter that hasn't been already said 1,000,000 times? As the winter settles into its depth and our crescent of the planet sinks to the nadir of its long sleep, we too return to our nucleus. For a few short days, we fold ourselves into that small pod of our kin until the year turns and we shake ourselves into another January. You're kind of thinking, I'm just after reading the mark prices, and then go from the ridiculous to the sublime. I'm going to finish up with a little piece. Let me see now, where am I going here? Number 9, I have written on my notes here. Yeah, the power of the word, which I think is fitting given that, Jim is such a wordsmith. So this is, I suppose, shines a little light on Jim's relationship with the word. It was a fine autumn afternoon in 1969. The schoolyard was full of whooping children enjoying the 2 o'clock break. I should have been with them, but I was still in the classroom, where the yellow shafts of autumn sunshine beamed through the tall windows, illuminating a galaxy of swirling dust particles. I sat there trying to figure out why the master had told me to stay behind. What had I done wrong? I was perplexed as I watched the tall, gaunt teacher walk down between the rows of desks, carrying a big dictionary. He perched himself on the upper section of the desk in front of mine and opened the book on his lap. "Now, James," he said, "you're good with words, always have a dictionary close at hand, and every day learn a new word and its meaning." While I can't say I followed his advice to the letter, his words and actions sank a deep well for me, a well I go back to again and again for reassurance and sustenance. More than 50 years later, words are still making a difference to me. Stringing them together gives my life a sense of purpose and helps provide me and mine with food, heat and shelter. Words make a difference and certainly have made a difference to me. I'm privileged to work with them, to experience their power and their beauty. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it suffices for me just to wish Jim the very best of luck with this latest compilation. I think it's a fabulous collection of work for the last 2 years, and I don't think this book is going to get you off the hook, Jim, now for finishing the other 3 that you have sitting on a PC somewhere at home. You're going to have to get around to finish them at some time. But all I can say for now is the very best of luck with this one, and well done again. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take seats, please, or if you want to stay standing. The standing will continue for another 2.5 hours, so I'd say you should take seats. So, are we good? Anybody else want to take a seat or two? They're there. So, you're all very welcome to the launch of Matters of Great Indifference, Jim O'Brien's second book. Very welcome here to the Ogonnelloe Exchange here in the beautiful village of Ogonnelloe. This, as I think we all know, is Jim's second edition, as it were, of Matters of Great Indifference. The first was very much his ramblings and his writings drawn from many years. I say ramblings about Jim, because they were great ramblings.
Perfect.
You're already.
But the rambler had his wings clipped, like we all did. And instead of it being, I suppose, solitary confinement, the second book was written out of COVID confinement. So I guess it was a very interesting challenge for Jim to do that as a writer, because you were taking it from the highways and byways, your inspiration over the years, Jim. So now it was time to go within and to, I suppose, tap into the deep recesses of the memory for all those lovely moments. And out of it came the second edition that we're about to enjoy. I had a few moments this afternoon. Jim gave me loads of notice here for this and dropped in the book at 6:45. So I had great time to go through the book and prepare for this.
I didn't want to give him too much information.
So even the quick perusal of it, I mean, it's everything I think we've come to know about Jim O'Brien. It's how it's written, it's the creative writing, the storytelling, but it's all those lovely places, I suppose, that many of us have been as well. But I suppose we'd all love to have the ability to talk or write about them like Jim does. I'm not going to do much talking, because the job of an MC, I heard it said once, I thought it was a brilliant description for an MC, it's a bit like the corpse at an Irish wake. It's sort of important for the event, but not expected to say a whole lot. So, without further ado, for the moment, at least, I will call on Dominic Taylor. And Dominic is from the Limerick Writers' Centre, which supported this. And looking at the description of the Limerick Writers' Centre, what really I admire from it is they look at, or have a belief that writing and publishing should be made available and accessible to all. So for supporting this book and much else, we thank you, Dominic, and we call on you to say a few words. Thank you.
Dermot good Hughie, August Fall the Road, Captain. And thanks to all of you for coming out here tonight to celebrate the publication of Matters of Great Indifference, Volume 2, by journalist and author Jim O'Brien. As you just said, my name is Dominic Taylor, and I'm the director of the Limerick Writers' Centre and Revival Press. First of all, let me say that Matters of Great Indifference, Volume 2, is the 138th title that we have published since we began our community publishing project in 2009. Since then, we've endeavoured to carve out a unique position in relation to literature in Limerick and the North Munster area, I would say. I think we have successfully brought ideas about books, literature and writing to a wide audience, both locally and nationally. I'm proud that Limerick Writers' Centre are publishers of Matters of Great Indifference by Jim O'Brien. Jim is a fine writer and has learned his trade and learned it well. Jim has already had success with Volume 1 of Matters of Great Indifference, and I'm confident that the success will be repeated with Volume 2. These essays are superbly written, hugely witty, and describe rural life like it is. Like James Herriot's tales from rural Yorkshire, the themes in this book are universal and the writing is delightful. Writing is often more than just a literary exercise. It's about bringing people together and sharing, where the inner life of the writer and the reader can converge, and where something can happen that forces us to think or act differently. As remarked last night by Dara McCullough, of the RTE programme Ear to the Ground at the official launch in Kildimo, Jim's native place. His weekly column in the Farming Independent has become something of a pulpit for Jim, where each week he delivers a secular sermon which has become a must-read. If that is so, then Matters of Great Indifference Volume 2 must be a Bible for everyday living. I urge you to read it and enjoy. And I'd like to congratulate Jim on the publication of his book, and I wish him well in his writing career. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. The book is written in chronological order, and as I said, I've only had 5 or 10 minutes with it. I've got as far as chapter 17.
Shorter every time.
So I'm assuming, Jim, that the chapter on me comes further on. I'm looking forward to that.
There's a book on you.
I certainly hope not to be wrong with that published.
And followed by a mini-series.
Less than a mini.
The only thing is X-rated, so
That I can assure you. So it is written in chronological order, and it starts with a lovely piece around when tractors were Porsches. Now, I've admired so much about Jim O'Brien over the years, but I never realised that they had Porsches in the yard. They might have had porches, but they had Porsches in the yard in Kildimo, not one but 2 at one stage. And I can only imagine Jim going to school as a young lad telling his friends in Limerick, yeah, we have 2 Porsches. But there are other lovely, entirely all of them are lovely and beautifully written, as we can imagine. But one that really grabbed me for the few minutes I had with it this evening, I'll emphasise that again, was the power of the word. Because I think this is really where it all comes from. The great writers, and indeed Jim O'Brien, I would have to say, is a great writer, because he can write in a way that takes us to a special place, and I think that's what great writers do. But the power of the word is a lovely chapter that starts in school in 1969, when he was asked to stay back by the school principal. So clearly, as I read the first paragraph which opened on that, I was thinking clearly he was as bowed then as he is now. But then we proceed to hear or to read about why he was kept back, and I'll just do a couple of paragraphs for you. I sat there trying to figure out why the master had told me to stay behind. What had I done wrong? I was perplexed as I watched the tall, gaunt teacher walk down between the rows of desks carrying a big dictionary. He perched himself on the upper section of the desk in front of mine and opened the book on his lap. Now, James, he said, you are good with words, always have a dictionary close at hand, and every day learn a new word and its meaning. While I can't say I followed his letter or his advice to the letter, his words and actions sank a deep well for me, a well I go back to again and again for reassurance and sustenance. More than 50 years later, words are still making a difference to me. Stringing them together gives my life a sense of purpose and helps provide me and mine with food, heat and shelter. Words make a difference and have certainly made a difference to me. I am privileged to work with them, to experience their power and their beauty. And I think we are all privileged to have experienced the power and beauty of how Jim has worked those words. So we've a very special guest, obviously, was here tonight to launch the book. I would have always and still do associate her as MEP, Marion Harkin. Of course, she is Deputy Marion Harkin. She served as an MEP for 15 years, from 2004 to 2019 for the Connacht Ulster region. This was after running for European Parliament first in 1999. Now, I emphasise that it was just 3 years after she was widowed and had 2 young kids, but had a particular calling, I think, that really makes her perfectly aligned and compatible with what this community is about, which is working for others, working for communities, and that was a calling that was always going to be answered. A native of Tubbercurry in County Sligo, they had a grocery and a travelling shop. Now, I'm not quite sure what the travelling shop is, but we'll get around to that piece, but I have a fair idea. 25 years she worked at Mercy College in Sligo as a maths teacher. She moved to Manor Hamilton in Leitrim in 1984 with her husband Sean and 2 young kids. Just a few short years before Sean passed away, and it was at that stage, I think it's fair to say, that the flame for her rural development work, her entire political career and her social calling was lit. She got involved in a number of projects there, the North Leitrim Glens Development Association, and she was pivotal in the creation of the Western Development Commission, which has indeed Clare as part of its remit. So before you go back home, I'm sure there'll be a few more applications landing, Marion. So without further ado, somebody who is, I think, a really good fit for tonight for all sorts of reasons, and I suppose an illustration as to what tonight means to her and her desire to be here is that she comes from Sligo, and in the Ireland that we live in, that we'd love to all change, everything, all roads and rail goes to Dublin. So Marion went from Sligo to Dublin, and Dublin down to Clare, to be here tonight. So Marion, thank you very much for joining us. Please take the stage and give what will no doubt be a due tribute to Jim.
To a dance, because if the car broke down, he said, the petrol would be worth more. You brought us to a time when Eddie Macken lifted the nation on Boomerang, and Harvey Smith was everyone's favourite Englishman until Jack Charlton arrived. In all of this, Jim, you deftly keep the wheels turning. But before I finish, I want to give you one piece of advice and raise one cause for concern. Despite the fact that you have, shall we say, a varied political history, I would stay away from the Greens if I were you. Or at least from giving them the advice you publish on page 153, where you tell, and the reason you do this is because of your aversion to hard physical work, i.e. saving and footing turf. So you tell the unsuspecting Greens, banning the saving of turf should guarantee the Greens a lorry load of rural seats in every election. At least until the experience is erased from the cultural memory of most country people. Jim, it's easy knowing you weren't born west of the Shannon. And I'm with the lady from the Midlands on this one, when she said to you, what do you know about turf? And my slight concern was raised when I read about your hankering to live close to the edge, your simmering impulsiveness, where you describe the high tension of a bidding war at a virtual land auction, and your finger is hovering, tempted to click and put in a daft bid on a piece of random property. And we know the only person who stops that. But when I also read in another story about what you did with the hot poker, an audience, you'll have to read the book to find out what that says. But it sort of unsettled me. So now I realise I'll have to read the press releases you send me a little more carefully, just in case there's a political incendiary device nestling between the semicolons. But ladies and gentlemen, there are no incendiary devices lurking in here. There's warmth, wit, and quite a bit of wisdom. You meet new faces, and you'll run into characters you have known all your lives. You learn new words, even I did, and you'll remember old ones. You can dip in and out without affecting the rhythm of the book, because each story is a small work of art in itself. You'll be charmed and at times you will be challenged. But you'll be glad you bought this book. And like me, you will be delighted that you know the author. I was looking for just one word to describe Jim O'Brien, and I came up with the word storyteller. But then I realised I needed to rate storyteller. I'm so pleased to launch this book.
It's cliche, but if Carlsberg did book launches, they'd be getting Marion Harkin for them all. And thank God, actually, I wonder what would have happened. How big would it have been if that woman didn't get on at Longford?
Oh.
Yeah, that was. I think that was super. I mean, we came knowing we would enjoy Jim's book. I don't think we came realising how much we would enjoy your review of it. Your acknowledgement of Jim's greatness, and I think I in particular took great joy in the little bit of a spanking you gave him towards the end. That's my personal takeaway. I really enjoyed it. I think a gentleman up in Laura once said about such a situation, he could now crawl out under the door with his cap on. He feels that low. So I know it was super, Marion. We've been privileged to have you here to take us through that. I think it's made us all want to read the book more. So you spoke at the end about the warmth, the wit, the wisdom, the new faces and the new characters. We got new character. We got all of that from you as well. So thank you very much for that. You could go on, I suppose, all night about a review like that, but the main piece is the man himself, Jim. I've had the privilege since I came to live in Ogonnelloe, and great luck to fall in league with this gentleman, and I think we all who've had that joy, you'd all share in that, because to be in Jim O'Brien's company is to be lit up, is to have the crack, is to learn, is to listen, and it's also to hear the music. And there is a lovely chapter on that, on chapter 17, My Legacy Will Be a Thing with Strings. Now before I just give a small bit about that, we've had great moments with music here, and Marion, we've had in this particular hall some incredible moments of community and music, and not least I think the celebration that Jim and Louise led around the 1916 centenary. What was done here was just remarkable. And we'll tell you all about that, and Jim I'm sure will later, but it was a wonderful piece. But there were many memories from I think what was 3 or 4 nights that were completely sold out, the hall packed from that. But one of my best memories happened actually at the Piper's Inn a few hours later, when at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the good gentleman in blue called, and Jim was in the middle of delivering his legacy with strings, playing John Denver, what was it, American Pie, and he was flat out. I don't know, was anybody else there at that moment, but if I had the ability, or any of the 50 or so people who were there had the ability to write with Jim, it would be an award-winning piece describing how Jim continued to play in the armchair. Everybody else stopped, while over his shoulder, which of course he doesn't have eyes in the back of his head, was the fine member of An Garda Síochána, standing silently while Jim continued through American Pie. And then Jim, I don't know if was anybody there, it was hilarious. Jim then realised everybody was gone quiet. He was doing a solo in the non-solo song of the century, and turned around to see, oh shit! He leapt literally 2 feet. He came off the chair as if there was a spring on it that catapulted him. So that was one of the fun legacy with strings. But this is a beautiful piece that he's written. I'm just going to take you through a small bit of it. The guitar has been good to me. Like the old John Denver song, it introduced me to some friends. It introduced me to some friends of mine, from Ballyculhan to Ballykenny, from Abbeyfield to A-U-B-A-I-S, where's that?
Obey.
Obey, lovely Jim. From Kennedy to Kent, from Newton to Illinois, and from Ballinagra to Ballywilliam. I got in there. Finally.
You did.
Yeah. I was even introduced to the Pearl, to Pearl the Girl from Errol, via the lungs of a man who is huge from Rathdowney. The guitar has been like a passport, a plane ticket and a train ticket. Of course, like all good friends, there were times it could be a pain and an encumbrance. It was inclined to get above itself, becoming the focus of attention. Indeed, some invitations to parties and functions should have been addressed to the instrument. Dear guitar, please bring gin. However, the blessings it brought, the doors it opened, and the friendships it nurtured far outweigh any blisters it might have caused to body, mind, or soul. Of late, my youngest offspring has surreptitiously taken an old guitar of mine to herself, and with the help of YouTube tutorials and a passion for music, she's causing me no end of quiet delight. At first, I pretended not to notice. There is nothing like the unbounded enthusiasm of a parent to put a halt to a child's tentative steps in a new direction. I couldn't resist eavesdropping and would find any excuse to linger in the vicinity of her playing, tiptoeing away if I felt I was smothering the flame. One day, I plucked up the courage to suggest a chord progression. On another occasion, I mentioned a song that might be worth learning. Then I started to hear the strains of tunes from my ancient playlist. Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. He does that better than anybody. Paul Simon's Cathy's Song, a ballad I got from an old friend in Fermanagh called The Lakes of Coolfin. God forgive her, she even knows all the words to Don McLean's American Pie. A song that can cause the guards to be called to the most civilised of parties. One night recently, with a glass or two of wine on board, I handled my own guitar, snuck into where she was strumming, and joined her for a gentle session of soft ballads. In the case of one of my children, I'm beginning to understand that legacy is a thing with strings. Thankfully, she brings to the craft her own subtlety and grace and a set of nail clippers. Yeah. It's a beautiful piece, like all the pieces, and how he just weaves so much together in a way that we would all love to be able to do. So, without further ado, the floor is for Jim O'Brien.
A fellow should die more often. I'm going to go and do it. Time Harvey Sasta, Baron Shaw. From an Lower Shaw, a Curfew Law and Yule. I'm delighted to be here in Ogunlo to launch this book. My notes are all over the place because the book fell under the car when I came up. So, if you think, find me looking for the going out entrance, you'll know what happened. I suppose, is Dochagor Curter on Lower Shawfwell on Yol Gach de Mort. I suppose it's launched every Tuesday in some Northbound Shin on Farming Independent. Ach, nach das on Rudde will Kush Kalura again going. You know, I know it's launched every Tuesday in the Farming Independent, but it's great to have an excuse to celebrate. And sure, any excuse is a good excuse. It reminds me of a friend of mine who was Jack Lillis is his name, and his mother Patsy and all the Lillises were at a function last night in Kildimo where we launched this for the first time. And Patsy and my mother and father and Jack and myself went to a pub at the Ferry Bridge in Kildimo one night. And we had a great night. We sang songs and we drank a few pints. And we came out afterwards, and Patsy says, "We'll have to do this again this year." Because when you think of all those fine young men who died for Ireland, wouldn't they be turning in their graves if they thought we weren't enjoying it after all that? So why should you launch a book once when you can launch it twice? So I suppose This book is volume 2. The first book was published in 2020 at the height of the COVID crisis and at the height of a lockdown. And at that time we had all kinds of virtual launches. We sent out all kinds of WhatsApp messages. I revived my presence on Facebook and used the parish newsletter, parish notes, carrier pigeons and smoke signals to spread the word. And we got a great reaction. We had many people coming, great sales in shops like O'Mahony's in Limerick, and we had them here in Mairead Barnes, up in Scariff, in the Forge, and in Keys there in the Coscotter. So we had a great, and it did very well. But my one memory is of the doorbell ringing and people appearing at the door with a mask on, looking for a book, and they'd put the money on one windowsill and I'd have the book on the other. And they'd leave the money and they'd take the book. And that's the way we sold most of the books. When you think back on it, it's quite surreal. So this time we decided to go mad entirely and not only have one launch, but to have 2 of them. And so it was great to be here tonight to have the second one here in Ogonnelloe. I suppose last night I was at home in my own place and we had a great night with family and friends, and it was like one big trip down memory lane. And I suppose tonight it's great to be here in Ogonnelloe in my adopted home, because all Irish rural communities are carbon copies of one another. And I launch it here tonight among the people I write probably most about now. The people I meet every day, the people I see every day, the people I see around me all the time. And I suppose it's hard every time you sit down at a blank screen, and I didn't realise how much Louise looks on, but she said she sees me sitting there. Because we now kind of work more communally, and we got a dog, that means we have to all stay in the same place, because if she's left alone for 5 minutes, she could destroy the family jewels. But anyway, so it can be a bit of a struggle week in, week out, and Louise said sitting there looking at me, looking at a blank screen. But something always strikes me, because life goes on and things are always happening all around us. There could be big things or small things. Like I said, there could be the arrival of a new dog or the departure of a queen, and anything and everything can be included. So there's inspiration everywhere. Just before I want to read one or two pieces, I'm conscious some people are standing, so I don't want to break your backs, but lads or women, if you want a seat, take a seat. And also, my wife is the timekeeper, so when I see a certain look, I know what to show. But anyway, I want to say thanks very much to the Irish Independent, and especially the Farming Independent, and to my editor, Margaret Donnelly, who actually tolerates what I write every week. She tells me she gets more grief from the people who do the crossword underneath it than she gets from my piece. Now, whether that's damning with faint praise, I don't know. But I just say thanks for allowing me to publish those. I also want to have a very good sub-editor, Sam Wheeler. Sam is a great fan of the column and loves it, but he also pulls no punches when I get my metaphors mixed up or when there are misspellings or typos. And I can have had some clangers, and he has saved my blushes on more than one occasion. I remember one time writing authoritatively about dinosaurs, and I described a particular dinosaur as Thesaurus Rex. So he was. Thank God for Sam Wheeler. So I want to thank in a special way Dominic Taylor of the Limerick Writer Centre. I saw Dominic's work in a book published by a friend of mine, Father Holliston, a few months ago. And also the last book was purchased, God forgive us, through Jeff Bezos. And I think Jeff isn't short of a few pounds. And so it was great to publish this book with an organisation that works cooperatively, creatively, and keeps everything local. And they do powerful work. So thanks to the Limerick Writer Centre. Thank you very much. And I think we signed, sealed and delivered with the minimum of fuss, and there was little enough drama in the whole thing. Thank you. I want to thank Donal O'Keefe and the Design Factory for designing the cover of the book. The cover is and I wanted to talk to Mike Mack before I actually published it. I was up one Sunday morning, went up the old road there, and I was up over the cliff, and there's an abandoned house up there, and it's just been cleared. And I took a photograph out over the lake, and this tree stood out there. Whose farm is it? I think David Sheedy has been clearing it up there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
Clearing it, yes.
Yeah. So just taken up there anyway. So that, and he did a lovely job on that. I want to thank my good wife Louise, who is the current consort, and is currently staying around, thankfully. I suppose Louise is the first one to read the column every week, and I'll always know from the reaction whether it's working or not. If she hands it back to me and says, "That's grand," I know I might as well be shoving it into my ear as publishing it. But if she giggles halfway through it or smiles and say, "That's a good column," I know I'm at the pig's back and my week's work is done. But not only that, I mean, she prepared most of what's happening here tonight, and I'm just amazed constantly at the competence and the depth and the gorgeousness of the woman. She also manages the money. So I won't ever know how much we made on this book, but I'll certainly know if we don't make money. I want to thank my good friend Eugene Hogan and my sparring partner. Myself and Eugene have been soldiering together creatively, I suppose, since we arrived here. It started one day, we were kicking stones outside the church after Mass, and we said we have to do something about 1916. And we did something, and I think it worked. And ever since then, we've been doing kind of mad things together. And I suppose our motto is taken from a friend of mine who says, "There are too many people doing sensible things."
Yes.
So thank you, Eugene, and thank you for your gorgeous words tonight. And so I suppose I come to Marion Harkin. I worked for Marion, and it's a joy and a challenge to work for such a good woman. I suppose I know her through her brothers. We were together in Castlemartyr. It's down, of course, now a very luxury hotel. In that time, it was a focus of teenage starvation. Because you know, anybody who has teenage children, or especially teenage sons, they spend most of their lives with their head in the fridge. So you can imagine having more than 100 of them and no fridge anywhere near them. So anyway, I got to know, and Mihal, her brother, was in my class, and we got on very well. Marion Harkin is a good woman. She's everything you would want in a politician. She's hardworking, she's honest, she sticks to detail, but will never take on anything she would not be able to bring to conclusion. She's not a promiser, she's a deliverer. In political discourse, she seeks the truth. She pursues what is right. She's passionate about equal opportunity for people and for regions. She devotes herself entirely to the common good. Above all else, she believes in taking on the issue, not the person. From the Taoiseach Micheál Martin to Jackie Healy-Rae, no politician has anything to fear from her on a personal level. But they had better know their stuff and better do what they say they're going to do. But personally, they have nothing to fear from her, because she takes on the issue and she doesn't let go. I am, above all, I'm deeply grateful to her for launching this here tonight. But above all, I would have to say that a sign of her integrity and her attention to detail. I said to her, and I asked her to launch the book, and she said, "I don't know if I'll have time to read it, I'm very busy." I said, "Marion, all you need to do, I'll tell you what bits to read. And I'll point you in the direction." And she said, "Jim O'Brien, I'm not launching a book I haven't read." And so that was, and she could have taken the shortcut, and she didn't. And she's also a very busy woman at the moment, because not just politically, but her mother is quite ill. And they're taking turns to mind her mother in Sligo. So I'm deeply grateful that you have taken a full day out of your life to come down here and do this. So Marion, thank you very much. Also, the thing about Marion, working for Marion, because she is excellent, she makes you excel. And whenever you do anything for Marion, you ask yourself, could I have done better? Because she does the best. And even at 64 years of age, when you think you're gone beyond apprenticeship, excellence and the apprenticeship in excellence lasts forever. And when you have a mistress or a master, in the right sense, Barry.
I'm looking at the current.
When you have somebody that you work for whose whole life is the pursuit of excellence, it brings the best out of you, I hope. So thank you, Marion. And I want just to thank her for her gorgeous few words. I won't keep you too long. Do you want me to read a piece? Or?
Yes.
I'm going to read.
That was fishing now, Jim.
Okay.
You're fine, Jim.
Okay. All right, so thanks a million.
You want to.
I suppose, in fairness to Marion, I'll read one about Castlemartyr and about a friend of mine. He was there last night, and he has threatened to sue me. About what I said. I'm trying to find it here. I had it. Here it is, 106. Anyway, I drank my first cup of coffee during a late night and illicit visit to the kitchen in the college where I was boarded. My friend and companion on the mission was a lad from the far west who believed rules and regulations were made to be flouted. He was in search of coffee, which he found on one of the shelves in the shape of a jar of Maxwell House. Turning his attention to the agate, he lifted the lid on one of the giant rings and moved the massive kettle into place. "This will be boiled in a minute, O'Brien. Will I make you coffee?" "I've never tasted the stuff," I answered. "I'm not sure I'd like it." "Well, it's about time you tried it," he said. "I can't let you out into the world without having tasted coffee. They'll say you've no class." "Sit down there and I'll make you one." He treated the kitchen like it was his own. "Do you take sugar in tea?" he asked. "I do," I replied. "Then you'll take sugar in coffee." He handed me my cup of the steaming liquid, and the first of about 50,000 I've drank ever since. I began to gulp it down, afraid we might be nabbed by a prowling dean. However, my friend settled himself at the end of the kitchen table, ready to enjoy his brew at a leisurely pace. "Come on," I said, "drink up and let's go, we'll be caught." "What's your rush?" he asked. "They'll hardly throw us out now, we're in leaving cert." With that, he took out a packet of cigarettes and a lighter. This was taking things to a new level in Ireland. Smoking in the college was absolutely forbidden. To be found out of bounds in the kitchen was one thing, but to be found out of bounds drinking staff coffee and smoking fags was like driving up to a Garda checkpoint with a bottle of beer in your hand and a cannabis plant on your lap. "Settle down, O'Brien," he said. "You can't have coffee without a fag. They're the perfect combination." I should add that a few months previously, the same friend bought me my first drink, the beginning of another lifelong loving relationship. He had me well ready for the world by the time we left our brideshead of the south. As the years have gone by, coffee has developed a culture of its own, wrapping an aura of sophistication around itself. White-shirted baristas are to be found in every town, brewing the beverage in a variety of concoctions, using beans grown in exotic places and tailored to tantalise every taste bud and palate. Nowadays, there are more snobs to be found in a coffee shop than at a wine sniffing. They're the kind of people who will only drink coffee brewed from organic beans grown by Trappist monks in the mountains of Colombia. In the meantime, tea has come to resemble the dilapidated big house outside the village where the waistcoats are threadbare, the silver is tarnished, and heedless dogs have the run of the place. In the kitchen, the fragile occupants sit as close to the agate as they can, taking tea in chipped china paid for with old money that's long gone. the cup of tea is in danger of becoming another relic of our decency. But I reckon it is making a comeback. Tea is elbowing its way up the social ladder and set to resume its rightful place as the empress of beverages. In some places, even the old tea leaves are back in fashion, regarded as more environmentally friendly than tea bags. A man I once knew liked his tea brewed from tea leaves and poured through a little strainer he placed on the rim of the cup. He referred to this as his contraceptive device. Yes, tea has survived the lean times, and why shouldn't it? Among other things, it has formidable friends. I remember hearing a story about two women from West Limerick who had come to the city on their monthly shopping trip. Before catching the 4:30 bus home, the pair bustled into a fancy coffee shop near the bus stop. As they sat down, arranging their shopping bags around their feet, the gentleman of the house approached, or the gentleman of the house. "What can I get you, ladies?" he asked. "We'll have tea for two and scones, please," one of them replied. The man sniffed the air and said, "We don't serve that sort of thing here." The women stood up, gathered their shopping bags, and as they prepared to leave, one of them turned to their erstwhile host, looked him in the eye and said, "Mark my words, you'll serve tea yet." There is nothing like a West Limerick woman to put you in your place. How are we for time?
Keep going. Keep going, Jim. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay, right. All right, I have... Pardon?
You have to abandon it.
Oh, yes.
The other thing.
Don't tell him about that. Okay, I'll do two bits. I'll do a serious one. I was going to read priest law, but priest law has been referred to, so I won't do that. I suppose as a father of daughters, I want to do 129. Okay. While I write this, a beautiful, talented, lovely and loved young woman lies dead in Tullamore. As a parent, I can only imagine that the pain of her family must have the weight of eternity. A father of daughters, I am only too aware of how vulnerable they are in a world where might may not be right, but often wields the upper hand. They are even more conscious of this and will often phone and stay on the phone while walking from one place to another, particularly in the evening or at night. I was born into a man's world. Aside from teachers and nuns, the only women in positions of power and influence were in India's Indira Gandhi, Israel's Golda Meir, and at a later stage Maggie Thatcher. All the serious players in the world were in black suits, aside from the Dalai Lama and the Pope. In the world of farming, be they in wellies or suits, at the boardroom or on the tractor, men occupied and continue to occupy the seats closest to the levers of power. I went to an all-male boarding school, a place I remember fondly. However, in hindsight, it was not good for us young males to spend 7 months of each of these formative years in an all-male environment. Women and girls, almost by virtue of their absence, were viewed through the prism of extended pubescence, were viewed as exotic, rare creatures to be wooed and won, or as objects of more base desires. Then I went on to another all-male environment, a seminary, and from there into a church where gender imbalance is no accident of history, but a clear and present policy, close as makes no difference to an article of faith. I want to be careful not to blame these institutions for my male ills. I have to take personal responsibility. All I know is I had a lot to learn when I emerged from them. My use of the word emerged might lead you to believe I was locked away and sheltered from the world, but I wasn't. I was very much at the heart of life, accompanying people through the ecstasies and agonies that go with being a human being on the planet. Ironically, one of the spiritual goals was to be in the world but not of the world. This often found people like me floating around in a parallel universe. I most certainly emerged as a man that needed a lot of work done. When I met my wife, I would say one of the first things she had to do was civilise me. In writing this, I do not want to cast aspersions on my former colleagues. the vast majority were and are the gentlest and most lovely of men. I'm talking for myself. Whatever it was about me, the years in predominantly male environments left me incomplete. Fate decided I needed to be taken in hand, and it gifted me with a family of women who, I'm sad to admit, have to continue their mother's work of reformation and transformation. This occasionally means eyeballing me to explain in simple terms how the world is different for women, and often not that pleasant at all. The reality of modern men, while it is much changed from that experienced by our fathers and forefathers, still has strong residues of what went before. Millennia of misogynism and sexism do not disappear over a few decades. They are deeply embedded in the fibres of our culture. Even among men who might regard themselves as sophisticated, sane, and urbane, there are strong traces of the sins of our forefathers. These find expressions in the nods, winks, and nudges that still go on between men when women are out of sight, out of earshot, and even when they are not. Potent traces are to be found in men's social media traffic, in our emails, in the things we receive and forward. While these might be regarded as a bit of crack, they stir up the residue of something deeper and more sinister, something that has not gone away, you know. Once stirred up, it can create the conditions for rotten things to happen. Like every father who loves his daughters, the murder of Aisling Murphy has made me face the volatile nature of the world they live in. It has also made me ask myself how I, as a man, in thought, word or deed, contribute to this volatility and to the persistence of a culture where some men conclude they have a license to kill. And I'll finish on a lighter note. You'll be happy to know. Let's see. Yeah. 47. A lot of you will hear echoes of this, but anyway. It's called Rumblings in My Gastronomic Memory. Every now and again a cry goes up urging us to go back to basics, a move trumpeted as the antidote to everything that ails us. I must confess to a recent longing to taste some of the basic foodstuffs I remember from my young life. Simple things like buttered scones, jam and brown sauce, not all in the same dish, I might add. These are among the tastes that graced my palate as a youngster. When I was growing up, mealtimes were the metronome that maintained the rhythm of the day. All things were scheduled around breakfast, dinner, the 4 o'clock and supper. There were also minor break times. In some households, mid-morning was marked by what posh people called elevenses, whereas many rural homesteads regarded the 4 o'clock as sacrosanct. On farms with a dairy herd, the afternoon collation was the important one, being the last bit bite or sup one got until the cows were milked. The 4 o'clock was the original rural takeaway, transported from the kitchen to wherever the work was happening. Delivering the repast was the job of those not quite old enough to pike hay, sow spuds, drive a tractor, or operate a chainsaw. Prior to being press-ganged into the world of real men's work, one had to serve one's time in the mobile catering department, hauling the 4 o'clock to the meadow. The light afternoon meal generally consisted of tea and homemade scones or scones, lathered in butter and topped off with jam. Sometimes there might be a few buttered slices of spotted dog, a type of solar bread with speckled with raisins. In some houses this was known as spotted dick, a name that for obvious reasons fell out of favour. The fare could also include fruitcake or barmjack, depending on the time of year. The tea was carried in whisky bottles snuggled into thick woolen socks and corked with wedges of tightly rolled newspapers. The scones and cakes were on a large dinner plate draped in a tea towel. It was no small feat for a pair of bony youngsters in short pants to carry all that food and drink, plus a few mugs, from one end of the farm to the other. There were no internal farm roads or sleek electric fences at that time. One had to haul the assortment of refreshments across cattle-poached fields and over stone walls, thick with profusions of briars and nettles on either side. To add to the challenge, those of us selected for the fodder party were often late leaving the house, and our mother would send us off with the injunction, "If ye fall, don't wait to get up." To sustain us on our odyssey to the outer reaches of the land, on occasion we found it necessary to commandeer some of the fare meant for men. Of them in. Depending on how far we were from our destination, there could be more than one raid mounted on the plate of goodies. We often arrived at our rendezvous with full bellies and a much depleted store of supplies. When my father and grandfather would see the meagre pickings remaining on the plate, one of them would ask, "Does your mother think 'tis a pair of snipes she's feeding?" We would try not to hiccup. So what took me on this journey back through the decades? Well, I was in the supermarket during the week, and as I passed an array of baked goods, my attention was drawn to a basket of scones. Although wrapped individually in cellophane, they looked delicious. Something rumbled deep in my gastronomic memory as I imagined one of them sliced in half, covered in butter and jam, and smiling up at me. As if possessed by some external force, I picked up a pair of the soft brown mounds of gorgeousness and made straight for the shelves containing the condiments and preserves. I quickly selected a pot of strawberry jam. Still in a state of possession, as I passed a shelf lined with sauces and spices from Bangalore to Ballymaloe, my nostalgia-stricken eyes spotted a simple bottle of Chef Brown sauce. Remembering there was some cold beef in the fridge, the ultimate supper began to take shape in my mind. Sliced tomatoes, a few slices of the current consort's brown bread, slivers of beef, and a spoonful of brown sauce on the side. What more could a country boy ask for? Such feasting! With the scones and jam, I had the makings of the classic 4 o'clock. A few short hours later, the cold beef and brown sauce would make for the perfect supper. Grabbing the bottle of Chef by the neck, I deposited it in the basket with the rest of my retro fare and headed for the checkout in full mid-20th century mode. I almost expected to pay for it in shillings and pence. When I got home and set my purchases down on the kitchen table, the current consort looked at them, looked at me, and wondered if I had become stuck in existential reverse. "The next thing you'll be wearing short pants," she said. "You wish," I said. Put on the kettle, my little cowslip. We're going back to basics. Finish by thanking the Hall Committee, thanking Mike and Donald and all on the Hall Committee. Isn't this a wonderful facility to have? Just fantastic, and just thanks so much for your generosity and for your time and for everything. I also want to thank the ranks of media here in front of me. And we have Owen O'Hagan there from Inishcaltra Media. We have Pat from Meelick, passed all the way from Meelick. He didn't need a visa. And we have Oscar and we have Aldair from Capard Media Limited. So, and thank you lads for taking the time for being here. And thank everybody. Is there anybody I've missed? No.
No, I don't think so.
I don't, that's good.
Of
course, Derek. So listen, as they might say in Irish, go again, agus can again. So thanks a million, and it was lovely to have you all here, and it was lovely to do this. And again, thank you, Marion, for your very, very kind words. Thank you.